to tour Hanwha Ocean's shipyard, accompanied by the South Korean premier and senior defense officials. Hanwha Ocean's competing with ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems of Germany to win Canada's submarine acquisition program, estimated to be worth up to 60 trillion won. Carney toured the German counterpart's facilities just a couple of months ago. The goal here is to supply Canada with a modified version of the KSS-3 Batch 2 submarine launched by South Korea for its own military use last week. This 3,600-ton class, 89-meter-long vessel has 10 vertical launch tubes for submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and the newly launched Korean vessel was flying a Canadian flag from its mast in honor of the VIP. Canada plans to acquire up to a dozen submarines. The hope is that it will favor the Korean side's offensive capabilities as well as the speed at which submarines can be built here. Carney was impressed by the enormous scale of Hanwha Ocean's site, while the commander of the Royal Canadian Navy described the submarine in question as beautiful, saying he was really impressed by its size, quality of crew accommodations, and combat information center layout. Ian Carney also agreed during their summit on a strategic partnership in security and defense to expand arms and defense cooperation, marking the first partnership of its kind that Canada's established with a country in the Indo-Pacific region. They additionally announced the conclusion of negotiations over an agreement on the protection of military and defense classified information, providing the legal foundation for enhanced collaboration. Interestingly, in the same time frame that South Korea would be building submarines for Canada, it would also be working on its first nuclear-powered sub, which this country's top naval officers suggested will take around 10 years. Further talks are apparently needed on the details, such as whether it will actually be built in the US, as suggested by President Donald Trump, while the envisioned submarine would be at least 5,000 tons in size. The some are looking on with suspicion. China's foreign ministry on Thursday called on South Korea and the US to be faithful to their nuclear non-proliferation obligations and to not do the opposite of acting for peace and stability. Aside from countering North Korean threats, tracking Chinese submarines is one of the key motivations for South Korea to have nuclear-powered subs. Seoul's position is that it has no need for its own nuclear weapons, given the US extended deterrence. But we'll see if the subject comes up when Yi holds a summit with Chinese.
Canada's decision to seriously explore a massive submarine partnership with South Korea sent ripples through Washington and across the global defense industry. While no formal contract has been signed, the scale, direction, and symbolism of the proposed deal marked a dramatic shift in how Canada is positioning its future military capabilities. Valued at an estimated $20 billion, the potential agreement represents far more than a procurement decision. It reflects changing alliances, strategic frustration, and a growing willingness by Canada to look beyond its closest ally for critical defense needs. For decades, Canada's military procurement has been closely tied to the United States. Geography, shared defense frameworks, and NATO commitments made American defense firms the default partners for major acquisitions. Fighter jets, radar systems, logistics platforms, and interoperability standards were all deeply integrated. Submarines, however, have long been an exception that exposed cracks in this relationship. Canada's current submarine fleet is aging, limited in availability, and increasingly costly to maintain. Operational readiness has been a persistent challenge. As global security conditions evolved and Arctic access gained strategic importance, pressure mounted on Ottawa to modernize its undersea capabilities. Submarines are not just weapons, they are intelligence platforms, deterrence tools, and symbols of sovereign reach. As the search for replacements intensified, Canada quietly began examining alternatives outside the traditional U.S. orbit. South Korea emerged as a serious contender. Over the past 2 decades, South Korea has transformed itself into one of the world's most advanced shipbuilding and defense manufacturing nations. Its domestically produced submarines, particularly the KSS series, have attracted international attention for their range, stealth, and advanced propulsion systems. Unlike many Western defense suppliers, South Korea has positioned itself as flexible, fast, and willing to tailor deals to their needs. This includes technology transfer, domestic industrial participation, and long-term maintenance partnerships. For Canada, these factors mattered. The proposed deal reportedly includes multiple modern diesel-electric submarines equipped with air-independent propulsion, allowing them to remain submerged for extended periods. Such capabilities are particularly relevant for Arctic and Atlantic patrols, where endurance and stealth are critical. The possibility of partial construction, maintenance, or systems integration in Canada further strengthened the appeal. From Ottawa's perspective, the proposal aligned with several strategic goals at once. It promised faster delivery timelines than many Western alternatives. It offered cost certainty at a time when defense budgets are under intense scrutiny. And it reduced reliance on a single supplier, a lesson learned from years of delayed and over-budget procurements. Washington, however, took notice. The United States has long viewed Canada's defense posture as an extension of its own continental security framework. NORAD, joint naval operations, and intelligence sharing rely on deep interoperability. A major submarine deal with South Korea signaled a shift toward diversification that some U.S. officials interpreted as a quiet rebuke. American defense firms were expected to be strong contenders in any Canadian submarine replacement program. The absence of a clear U.S. outrunner raised questions about pricing, delivery reliability, and political trust. While public reactions from Washington were measured, behind the scenes the message was clear. This was not the outcome many had anticipated. The reaction was not just about submarines, it was about influence. Defense procurement is one of the strongest levers of alliance politics. Choosing a supplier shapes training pipelines, data integration, maintenance dependencies, and strategic alignment for decades. By looking to South Korea, Canada demonstrated that it was willing to recalibrate those relationships when its interests demanded it. South Korea, for its part, saw the opportunity as transformative. Securing a deal with Canada would elevate its status as a top-tier global defense exporter. It would validate decades of investment in domestic innovation and open doors to other NATO and G7 markets. The symbolism of a North American ally choosing an Asian defense partner carried enormous weight. The geopolitical context matters. Global naval competition has intensified. Submarine fleets are expanding across Asia-Pacific, Europe, and the Arctic. Undersea cables, shipping lanes, and energy infrastructure have become strategic vulnerabilities. Silent presence beneath the surface is now one of the most valuable forms of military power. Canada's geography places it at the crossroads of these developments. 3 coastlines, vast maritime approaches, and an increasingly accessible Arctic demand a credible undersea capability. Yet years of delayed decisions left Canada behind peers with smaller economies but more modern fleets. The South Korea option represented a reset. Critics within Canada raised concerns. Some questioned whether non-US systems would integrate seamlessly with existing allied networks. Others worried about long-term political risks or the challenges of sustaining foreign-built platforms over decades. There were also debates about transparency, industrial benefits, and whether the projected costs would hold. Supporters countered that Canada could no longer afford paralysis. They argued that sticking with traditional suppliers had not guaranteed success. Delays, cost overruns, and shrinking readiness had weakened naval credibility. Diversification, they said, was not abandonment of alliances but a rational adjustment. The discussion quickly became symbolic of a broader shift in Canadian foreign and defense policy. Ottawa has increasingly emphasized strategic autonomy within alliances. This means remaining committed to NATO and North American defense while retaining freedom of choice in how capabilities are built. South Korea's rise as a defense exporter fits neatly into this new landscape. It is a close U.S. ally, technologically sophisticated, and politically stable. Partnering with Seoul does not represent a break from Western security norms, but rather an expansion of them. Still, the shock in Washington was real. The United States has grown accustomed to being Canada's primary defense partner by default. Seeing a major procurement potentially bypass American industry challenged assumptions that had gone largely unquestioned for decades. It also highlighted growing competition within the global arms market, even among allies. The proposed deal also reflected changing economics of defense manufacturing. South Korea's shipyards benefit from scale, efficiency, and continuous production runs. This allows for faster build times and more predictable costs. Western yards, often burdened by intermittent contracts and political interference, struggle to match that pace. For Canada, predictability mattered. Submarine programs are notorious for spiraling costs and delays. A partner with a track record of delivering on schedule was appealing, especially as geopolitical risks demanded urgency. As details emerged, the story captured public attention not because submarines are glamorous, but because of what the deal represented. It was a signal that Canada was reassessing how it balances loyalty, capability, and value. It was a reminder that alliances do not eliminate competition, even among friends. The U.S. response remained cautious. Publicly, officials emphasized continued cooperation and shared security interests. Privately, concerns lingered about precedent. If Canada could look elsewhere for submarines, what might come next? Fighter jets, missile defense, space systems, and cyber capabilities all sit at the intersection of national security and industrial policy. The submarine question opened the door to broader conversations about diversification and independence. At the same time, the deal was not finalized. Negotiations, assessments, and political review processes remained ongoing. Parliamentary oversight, budget constraints, and public debate would shape the final outcome. But the direction was unmistakable. Canada had options, and it was willing to use them. For South Korea, the potential partnership reinforced its emergence as a global defense power. Once primarily an importer of military technology, it has become a supplier capable of competing with established giants. Success in Canada would validate that transformation on the world stage. For Washington, the moment served as a wake-up call. Alliances endure, but they evolve. Influence must be maintained through reliability, competitiveness, and respect for partner priorities, not assumption. In the end, the story was not about turning away from the United States. It was about Canada asserting that strategic decisions would be made based on performance, cost, and capability. The submarine proposal crystallized that message in steel and silence beneath the sea. Whether the deal ultimately proceeds or not, its impact is already felt. It has shifted conversations, recalibrated expectations, and signaled that the defense landscape is becoming more multipolar, even among allies. The oceans are changing. Power is moving quietly below the surface. And Canada's choice to look toward South Korea has made that transformation impossible to ignore. Thanks for watching Alert 360 News, where real stories meet real impact. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join the fastest growing news community on YouTube.